6.3, trigonometric functions of any real angle. So we're expanding from the previously we had the trig functions for acute angles. That's angles between 0 and pi over 2. And now we're extending this to any real number value for an angle. The way you do this is by just tracing where the angle falls on a circle. Now here you could have the unit circle, but I've used the circle of radius r to make it a little bit more general. The point on the curve is the c coordinate and the s coordinate. I just call them c, comma s, point on there. And this point, of course, could be anywhere on the circle. Okay, and these are important to remember. Sine x is going to be the s coordinate over the radius, which means if the radius is 1, sine x equals s, right? But if it's not, you have to divide the radius out. So cosine x, similarly, is c over r. Now the sine, whether sine x is positive or negative, depends only on s, because r, the radius, is always positive. And same thing with the cosine x. Whether it's positive or negative depends only on whether c is positive or negative. This is important to remember. Makes it easy to visualize when sine and cosine are positive or negative. So c and s can be any real numbers that satisfy this equation, the equation of the circle, which is c squared plus s squared equals r squared. That's this circle with the center at the origin, radius r. Okay, the signs of sine and cosine. And I just graphed them out here. I mean, I'm just using the fact that sine is positive when s is positive and negative when s is negative, and cosine is positive when c is positive and negative when c is negative. But I graphed them all out for you. Here s is greater than or equal to 0, so sine x is greater than or equal to 0. I wrote in the quadrants, going counterclockwise from where both things are positive. 1, 2, 3, 4. They do mention quadrants, so you need to know what that means. In the homework, they mention it, and on tests. So in this region, s is less than 0, s is negative, so sine x is negative. Right. So that's in quadrants 3 and 4. Okay, in this region, c is positive, so cosine x is positive. And that's in quadrant 1 and 4. And here, hopefully this makes sense. It's not like you have to memorize this. You just have to memorize that the c-axis is the horizontal one and s is vertical. Well, that's alphabetical, so that's not hard. Just like x and y is alphabetical. And then you've got to memorize that c goes with cosine, which is not that hard, and s goes with sine. Okay. So here c is negative, so cosine of x is negative. Right? So that's in quadrant 2 and 3. And then cosecant, the sign is the same as for sine. That is, it's negative when sine is negative and it's positive when sine is positive. That's because cosecant x is 1 over sine x. And similarly, for secant x, whether it's positive or negative is the same as for cosine because it's 1 over cosine. Secant is 1 over cosine.